Ladies and gentlemen,
I have one, but you don't need it.
this afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, this afternoon I feel a little like a rabbi with someone else giving the sermon, but I want to make the most important announcement at the beginning. We do have washroom facilities, and we have a wonderful Bobcat machine just purchased, which we'll be happy to transfer you over there if the occasion suits. So please feel free to utilize our services. As with all cemeteries, we try and function on time, so we're just a moment or two behind schedule. I'd like to say good afternoon on behalf of the Board of Directors of Toronto Hebrew Memorial Park. And I welcome the staff and the volunteers, the leaders, friends, and all of you guests here this afternoon. It's particularly gratifying because as I left the house today, I noticed NFL Today was on, and the men are forsaking football. They're also forsaking one of the last golf games of the year. And I understand that some should be preparing for a large family Thanksgiving turkey dinner tonight. And they've taken the time to come out here. So I'm very, very much appreciated, as does everyone here at Toronto Hebrew Memorial Park. You know, each time I come out here as the president, I actually get excited looking at the expanse behind us here. 200 acres. And I often think of the 23rd Psalm when I come out here, which is common at gravesides. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. And nowhere do I believe, please turn off your cell phones. Nowhere do I believe that is more apt and illustrates this psalm than the scene that we're privileged to see here today. Some of you may be saying, well, what is Toronto Hebrew Memorial Park? Because over the years, those in the Jewish community have called it Pardes Chaim, and it sort of leaked out to the general community. In fact, yesterday, my family and I were honored to be at a prominent synagogue here in Toronto, and I walked over to the president and I said, I'd like to introduce myself. I represent Toronto Hebrew Memorial Park. And he said, this is my wife. And do you mind me asking, what is Toronto Hebrew Memorial Park? And I said, have you ever heard of Pardes Chaim? He said, of course I do, we're a member. And I said, then you know Toronto Hebrew Memorial Park. And on July 1st of this year, Pardes Chaim became a division of Toronto Hebrew Memorial Park. And today we're celebrating the community opening of Pardes Chaim, the garden or orchard of life. Some may be surprised that there'll be a dearth of religiosity here this afternoon, but this is truly a community opening. In June of this year, we had our religious consecration, and today we share our Thanksgiving with the general community. In the tradition of the ancient cemeteries, there will be no music. Before turning to our distinguished speakers, I want to collectively introduce to the guests and have you acknowledge our staff, our directors and officers, and would ask them all to stand now. All the directors, officers, and staff. Thank you very much. I want to thank our Executive Director, Howard Mammon, and Susan Brown, our Director, for putting this ceremony together with the assistance of the United Jewish Appeals event planning staff. By the way, our Superintendent, Bill Miltenberg, told me the other day he's been here 32 years, and I think that deserves a hand. Where are you, Bill? And introduce to you our newer Superintendent of Pardes Chaim, Jim Emery. You may remember him from the Jewish Y. I bring you greetings this morning, perhaps somewhat incestuously, as the Secretary of the Jewish Cemetery Association of North America. And I know those confreres of mine who I met with in Atlanta recently are thinking of us today. In fact, we had a workshop on opening cemeteries at that time, and I thought it was most appropriate. For over 15 years, Toronto Hebrew Memorial Park has been proud to support and participate in the ambitious programs of the Ontario Association of Cemeteries and Funeral Professionals, and to support its mission of protecting the values of memorialization and professionalism in the conduct of bereavement practice in the province of Ontario. We've joined them in press conferences at the legislature to remove unwanted realty taxes, I might add, gone to Ottawa to reverse adverse decisions in the tax department there, and joined them in their educational programs. Andrew Roy, its president, delivered the following letter, which I'll share with you. Dear board members of Pardes Chaim, on behalf of the board of directors and members of the Ontario Association of Cemeteries and Funeral Professionals, it's my privilege to congratulate you on the opening of Pardes Chaim. I only wish that I could have been there in person on this day. Your organization's participation and support of OACFP over the years has been significant and truly appreciated. So to show our appreciation of your support, we have made arrangements to donate a tree to help with the beautification of this newly opened cemetery. Howard Mammon, your executive director, tells me it will be a Fagus sylvatica, or in simpler terms, a red obelisk beech, which he intends to plant near the information area. Once again, congratulations on all your hard work. And I hope that Joanne Rogerson, who's here with us today, the executive director of the OACFP, will convey back to Andy and the board our sincere appreciation. And for those of us in the Jewish community, I think that we should remember that Stephen Speisman, Alav Sholem, was a distinguished member of that board for many years. You know, it's darn hard to single out people at a time like this, but I'm going to get myself into trouble and try. To our families who share with us this organization, sometimes in support and the odd time reluctantly, it does take a lot of time. But we've had the good fortune to have as directors of this organization two gentlemen to make this all come true, while the rest of us, most of us, sat back and watched. While his partner will be acknowledged in a few minutes, the person I'm going to introduce has used his professional and daily skills and donated all his time, together with his low-key personality, to coordinate the development of this 200-acre site and running the gauntlet of bureaucracy to make it happen. Ladies and gentlemen, a true leader in his own right in this community, Mr. Lou Greenbaum. first speaker needs little introduction. First elected to the legislature in Ontario in 1985, elected for the 7th time in 2007 as a member of provincial parliament for current constituency of York Centre. He has served as minister of at least 4 provincial ministries, I believe, and we recall his awardship. Was it government services at the time or consumer and commercial relations at the time? I'm really jogging my memory here today, but with great pleasure I want to introduce him. He and his late wife Wilma have 2 sons, 2 daughters, and Kanenahora 10 grandchildren. Mr. Monty Quinter.
Good afternoon, and we've got Chairman Fish, Mayor Jackson, not my ally, but he's my friend, Peter Sherman, who you're going to be hearing from shortly. And ladies and gentlemen, I bring you greetings on behalf of Premier Dalton McGuinty and the Government of Ontario. And I really, as you heard, I at one time, 25 years ago, served as the Minister of Consumer and Commercial Relations and had responsibility for the funeral services sector. So I'm very familiar with the issues, and I have sort of a watching brief on them and try to help whatever I can. But I am pleased to be here today on behalf of the Honourable John Gerritsen, who is the Minister of Consumer Services, for such a special day in the community. The Ministry of Consumer Services helps us as we go about our day-to-day lives, whether we're buying or renovating a home, buying a car, booking travel, or even arranging funeral services. The ministry is there to inform and protect us as consumers. And the Toronto Hebrew Memorial Park, which has built this beautiful site, and I really was impressed when I came in, has a very fine working relationship with the ministry, and I know that Minister Gerritsen appreciates the work that it does in assisting our community when loved ones pass on. We remember and honor our loved ones, not just for ourselves, but for our children and our grandchildren. This beautiful location, almost unique among Jewish cemeteries, offers serenity for remembering and mourning those who are buried here or elsewhere or have no known burial site. Here we can experience nature and spirituality together. And I want to acknowledge the vision of the lay leaders who saw the need for a cemetery like this and who, through their own efforts and abilities, created it for the community. And Pardes Chaim Cemetery is truly a space for the community. As you heard, they've already had the religious ceremony, but this is a community cemetery. It serves all Jews from the most secular to the very devout. And just as importantly, the cemetery is here for individuals who may not even be affiliated with a synagogue or a burial society. Inclusiveness and community are important values for our government. And I see those values reflected in the vision that has created Pardes Chaim Cemetery. On behalf of the Minister, I want to express our gratitude for the work that has been done to bring us to this marvelous facility. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker comes to us from Thornhill, currently the Progressive Conservative Party critic for economic development and trade in the Ontario Legislature, formerly radio host here in Toronto, been in the legislature now since 2007, I believe. Mr. Peter Sherman.
Thank you very much, Bill, and Your Worship, Mayor Jackson, my friend Ted Sokolsky, Chairman Fish, MPP Quinter, members of the board and friends. A friend asked what I was doing this weekend, the other day, and I said, well, one of the things I'm doing is I'm helping to inaugurate or open a new Jewish cemetery. And his response was, what a bummer. And I said, no, not at all. In his defense, most people do think negative thoughts when you mention the word cemetery. We go to cemeteries to participate, usually in sad events, and we say to each other, "Auf Simchas," only on good occasions. The last time I was at Pardes Chaim Cemetery, we buried a good friend, a very good friend, and a contemporary of mine who died suddenly while doing something he loved and something I loved doing with him, playing golf. I participated in the burial as we Jews do, the last earthly mitzvah, the last thing that I could do for my friend. That was an example of why many people do have negative thoughts about going to a cemetery. But cemeteries are also, indeed, some people would say, mostly for the living. While I was at Pardes Chaim that day, and in a very nearby section, I visited a headstone which bears my own family name. My parents are buried there next to each other in death as they were in life. I like to think, and I felt, a different emotion. Certainly there was the sadness of missing them, as there always is, but there's a tranquility about that place where they are at rest. The beauty that Toronto Hebrew Memorial Park has created and has ensured for the future of the entire tract of land at Pardes Chaim, and so notably on a beautiful autumn day like this one, helps one to reflect and think back on the good times. And that gives me, and it should give all of you, a very warm feeling participating today as we look out to Pardes Chaim to reflect in future years that same feeling I describe as emanating from Pardes Chaim now. We as Jews understand the essential mitzvot or good works that we must perform, how we treat and care for our loved ones in life and in death. And they're tangible evidence of that. So we are not here burying anyone today. We are celebrating an expanding ability to fulfill our mitzvot, and in a very real sense then, we are seeing each other on what is a good occasion. I was surprised to hear that we are so close, just 4 or 5 years away from completing Pardes Chaim and requiring Pardes Chaim. I congratulate the board and management of Toronto Hebrew Memorial Park for their outstanding work and planning very well for the future. As the member of Provincial Parliament for Thornhill, the largest single constituency for Jewish citizens in Ontario, I thank you, and on behalf of them all, I express the hope that none of us makes it up here too fast.
Peter raised 2 points. One of them with regard to the fact that many people consider a cemetery a negative. But in Jewish tradition, the importance of a cemetery is borne out by the fact that from the shtetls of Europe to the city of Toronto, the first established Jewish community organization has been the cemetery, not the synagogue. Here in Toronto in 1849, what is now known as the original Holy Blossom Cemetery was created at Pape and Girard, and I see some of you nodding your heads. The second thing regards the fact that the cemetery is for the living, and thus the name Pardes Chaim. So thank you, Peter, for those words. Cemeteries are also part of the municipal planning process. And this afternoon we're pleased to have 2 heads of the regional and municipal governments that have jurisdiction over these lands. The officials of both these units of government assisted our organization in, excuse the expression, shepherding us lambs through the planning process. Just following up on my 23rd Psalm analogy. Bill Fish, my namesake, is also my learned friend, although I don't think we've ever met before. He's from Osgood Hall, myself from another place. But in 1997, he was appointed chair, CEO of the regional municipality of York, that I noticed the other day now has over 1 million population. So congratulations. Next to Hazel McCallion and her 32 years in office, he has 13. I have about 20, but we've got a lot to go to catch up to Hazel. I want to take this opportunity now to introduce Bill, who's married to Tova Fish, has 2 children, David and Karen, and we welcome you this afternoon.
Thank you very much, Bill, and good afternoon, everybody. We didn't need the tent because the sun always shines in Vaughan. Isn't that right, Mayor Jackson? It always shines. But I understand why we had the tent. We never can be sure, but it's always a sunny day here in Vaughan. Monty Quinter and Peter Sherman and our distinguished guests, thank you so much for all of your being here. It's very difficult to follow a distinguished speaker like Monty and Peter, who was a radio personality and a wonderful speaker himself, because they always say the things that I was about to say. So as a result, I'm going to change my prepared remarks and talk from the heart. Because as Peter said, your parents are here. My parents too are here in Pardes Chaim. In fact, 25 years ago, almost to the day, I came to Pardes Chaim for the very first time. I had been regrettably many times at Bathurst and Steeles and Shepherd and Bathurst and Eglinton and the Forest Hill area, where many of the cemeteries are. But I had never come this far north. And I thought, as I'm driving north on Dufferin Street, I thought, my goodness, we are just traveling forever, it seemed. Regrettably, it was my uncle that we were burying. He was the very first member from my family who had survived the war and come to this country to have passed away. And I was, it was 25 years ago, so I was 7 at the time. I wish that were true. But I was driving a car, so I was a bit older than that. And I think as I came up Dufferin Street with everyone from the cemetery, I commented, as I said, that we were a long way north. There weren't a lot of people. And when we got there, my uncle was almost in the front row on Dufferin Street. Because, ladies and gentlemen, 25 years ago, the cemetery of Pardes Chaim, I think, was maybe 10%, 12% full. I'm not sure how full it was. And 25 years later, we find with all the growth, not only in York region, not only in the city of Vaughan, but the Jewish community generally, we find, of course, that, as Peter mentioned, in about 4 or 5 years, Pardes Chaim will be full. And that's why it's so important that the Pardes Chaim has been built. And I can tell you, on that day and on subsequent days thereafter, when pretty much my entire family of the generation ahead of me is now buried here in Pardes Chaim. On that day and all the subsequent days, you did feel unhappy in many ways to come to the cemetery. But at the same time, each and every time that I come back to put a stone on my father and mother's grave, to put stones on my uncles and aunts' graves, to put stones on now many friends and other family members who are buried here. When I come back to Pardes Chaim and see what was described by Monty as the tranquil location, you feel that you are coming to a place where you can decide and believe that this country is a wonderful country for the Jewish community, and this region and this city is a wonderful country and community for everybody. The diversity that we have here is truly incredible, and the Jewish community has embraced York region, they've embraced Vaughan, they've embraced Markham, they've embraced this entire community, and I want to thank all the people, some of whom, many of whom stood up earlier this afternoon. I want to thank all of them, Bill and your board of directors, Lou, who I know very well, who behind the scenes does incredible things for so many different groups. I want to thank all of them for bringing this cemetery to our community, for the Jewish community, and for the community at large. But congratulations to all of you. Thank you so much. I'm pleased that we were part of trying to make it a little easier and to get through all the problems that developers know they have, and everyone who wants to build in our community sometimes has. But at the same time, though, it's an honor to be part of a community that does so well for everybody in our area. Thank you very much.
The former little city above Toronto has become the big city of over 280,000 people. It's somewhat of a paradox, Mayor, that the zoning in this area fails to mention cemeteries as a separate land use. I guess we're, in the words of the 23rd Psalm, simply green space. In 2006, Linda Jackson became the mayor of Vaughan, the growth of Vaughan has occurred under the wardship of herself and her mother of blessed memory, Lorna. In 1991, I had the distinct honor and pleasure of introducing Lorna Jackson, the then mayor of Vaughan, at another historic occasion. That was when we gathered to consecrate the opening of the gates of Pardes Chaim. Mayor Jackson, Lorna Jackson, was a strong supporter, as her daughter is, of Toronto Hebrew Memorial Park. Today it's my pleasure to welcome Lorna's daughter and Linda to participate with us in the opening ceremony of Pardes Chaim. Thank you.
Thank you, William, and good afternoon to each and every one of you. And I'd just like to begin, as I was sitting here and listening to all these eloquent speakers, and Chairman Fish said that it was a tough act to follow. Now I have to follow him. So, and as I was going through it, I was crossing off things that I was going to say. So I think I'm going to also just speak and talk about our community. But first off, William, congratulations. But I want to congratulate all the directors and officers of the Toronto Hebrew Memorial Park for this wonderful expansion, this 200-acre site. Pardes Chaim, I travel regularly up and down Dufferin Street with that entrance and know of that facility and how that has grown. But as we all know, Vaughan is one of the fastest growing Jewish populations outside of Israel. So it's very understandable to realize there's a huge need to be able to expand the cemetery. So with Pardes Chaim, I want to make sure I get that right. It makes is that okay? Okay, thank you. It makes a perfect sense. And as William was saying, my mother participated in the opening of the gates at Pardes Chaim, and I remember her speaking very fondly of her connection with the Jewish community and being able to help them, and how when they first started moving into the city of Vaughan, how there was so many issues and challenges that had to face that she was able to help overcome with, and now it becomes a normal life, a normal part of our community, and one that, with Vaughan being such a diverse community, one that we are so proud of. But I'd like to speak about the stones. I had the good fortune earlier this year to travel with the Simon Wiesenthal Center for Holocaust Studies to Poland to visit to Auschwitz and a lot of the death camps. And with that, one of the places that we stopped at a very old Jewish cemetery. And we went over, and I had asked them, because I'm familiar with that part of the faith in the cemetery, what the stones represented. And they said, well, if loved ones or family come, they bring a stone and they put it by the headstone to remember the person by. And so they had asked me, and there was a person who was one of the first persons buried in this cemetery, which was probably 150 years old, very old cemetery in Warsaw. And so I placed a stone, and I thought, what a great memory. And when I came back to Vaughan, I went and I went to my mother's burial spot in Nashville, in Vaughan, and I placed a stone beside her headstone as a thing, to remember. We go and place flowers, but flowers die. Stones don't blow away, they don't disintegrate. They're there as a remembrance to our families. So I did that, and it was, and then a week or two later, my father called and said, "Who put the stones by Mom's head grave?" So it was like, lots of someone had gone and done something wrong, and I explained to my dad what it was about, and he said, "Oh, your mother would be really happy with that. She'd be very pleased." But cemeteries, they are, when you go the first to bury a loved one, you're filled with grief and you're filled with sadness, especially if it's a sudden death or if it's someone who you just feel is gone before their time. But as you go back and back, you get a sense of feeling and a sense of belonging. And if you can go there, now I can go to the cemetery where my mother is buried, and I can share a story and have a laugh, and that makes it okay, because it is, as your brochure says, a place for remembering. And when you can go and have that share, that place with her or with your families, especially in an environment where it's surrounded by beautiful trees, and they know that they're in a very restful and very peaceful place, it does make your heart feel good. It takes a long time, but it does get to that. But on behalf of myself, my colleague Sandra Racco has joined with me today. On behalf of all of the City of Vaughan, and as William was saying, 280, we're actually pushing closer to 300,000. I know we keep growing leaps and bounds every month. I want to congratulate the Toronto Hebrew Park for the opening of this cemetery here in the City of Vaughan, and we want to thank you for continuing to choose the City of Vaughan. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Mayor. Many of us are not familiar with the structure of Toronto Hebrew Memorial Park. Originally, Sid Friedman, who you'll hear from in a moment, who could have just as easily turned these cemeteries into a private enterprise for himself and his family, wanted to ensure that what he created was a community-based organization on the one hand, and one that reflected as well the interests of organizations such as synagogues, fraternal orders, and mutual benefit societies. He established a trust whereby THMP would carry on the operations of the cemeteries, and under the trust, the lands and property would ultimately find its way into the community in the form of the United Jewish Welfare Fund, as it was then known. To ensure that there was community input, he made sure the board members were divided equally between board members appointed by the Jewish Federation of Greater Toronto, as it is today, and secondly, the organizations that I mentioned a moment ago that comprised our membership, and today number over 70. An equal number of delegates are appointed each year by each of the two components to our annual meeting, which is held in November. I want to take this opportunity to welcome this afternoon Ted Sokolsky, the President and Chief Executive Officer of Federation, UJA Federation, and I introduce to you Alan Weiner, who is the chair of what is commonly just known as Federation. Alan.
Fortunately, none of the speakers before me repeated my remarks, so I can actually go. I don't have the same talents as they do to wing it. In our Jewish community, we have pride in the long-term infrastructure that we build, and more importantly, the impact that programs run from these projects have on our community and on Jewish continuity. But no infrastructure or project is more important to our community and its future than the purchase and building of Pardes Chaim Cemetery. This cemetery will ensure that the needs of our community are taken care of for generations to come. Pardes Chaim did not happen by accident. It took vision, leadership, commitment to Jewish values, and dedication. On behalf of our community, I want to thank Sid Friedman for having the vision and for being such a long-standing leader, and Bill Drayman for his leadership and commitment. Rashi, a Torah scholar in the 11th century, wrote that the kindness that is shown to the dead is a true kindness, because for this act of kindness, one does not expect to be repaid. The mitzvah of taking care of the dead is known as chesed shel emet, a true act of kindness. Our community is indebted to Sid and Bill, the officers and directors, and all volunteers for your tireless efforts in making Pardes Chaim a reality. May you all go from strength to strength.
Thank you, Alan. The pastoral landscape of which I spoke a few minutes ago is but the visual result of many other factors that come before. Well known by the representatives of the various community cemeteries who have joined us today, in this day and age, cemeteries don't just appear. They are the result of what Alan just referred to, the vision, the hard work, the community planning, yes, and even study, because you don't create a cemetery every day, one has to learn. This afternoon, we will be the students as we learn more of the details that came together to create this important addition to our Jewish community. The person behind that initial vision, the person who put in the hard work, the person who planned for the future Jewish cemeteries in the Toronto area, stands with us and before us. He studied the needs of the community. He personally found the required lands, both for Pardes Shalom and for Pardes Chaim, and he brought together the necessary players to make Toronto Hebrew Memorial Park a true community organization. And yet, surprisingly, there have been those that have suggested his commitment to the community wasn't as strong as it might be, or they wished it to be. My friends, I have worked side by side with this giant of men over 24 years, and I can attest to the strong sense of duty which he not only feels, but has exercised in action on behalf of this Jewish community of Toronto. He is our mentor, our friend, my colleague, our founder, the honorary life president, a devoted member of the Jewish community, and this afternoon it's my honor to acknowledge his friends and members of the Friedman family as we welcome Sid to the microphone.
Wow. You sound like my wife. She thinks I'm a great guy too. Mr. President, esteemed speakers, honored guests, ladies and gentlemen. Tomorrow is our day of National Thanksgiving. It's a day when we become especially aware of our continuing good fortune. We give solemn thanks for being permitted to be a functioning part of the very profound mystery of life itself. In all of these things are we truly blessed. But for those who have worked to make Pardes Chaim a reality, this is the 10th day of the 10th month of the year 2010. In addition, a singularly special day. For today we give thanks to be able to celebrate the culmination of a 15-year effort in establishing and officially opening Pardes Chaim, the second major cemetery ground owned by the total community which it serves. Years have gone by so quickly. At times I remember as yesterday, particular moments in the effort to create an entirely new paradigm. The establishment of an organization that is representative of the entire Jewish community in all of its diversity. I think back to a rainy spring day of 1991, the day that you referred to, when we dedicated Jens's garden and gates at Pardes Shalom. If I go back for a moment to that day in 1991, after listening to the gracious introduction that Bill had made prior to my speaking, he has a habit of doing that. In reply, I thought aloud that the next time that such nice things are going to be said about me at Pardes Shalom, I would be without doubt somewhat out of earshot. When the laughter had all but subsided, the gathering heard the tiny voice of my then 2-year-old granddaughter exclaim, "My Zadie made a funny." Her unexpected comment prompted an additional round of laughter. But even at times such as that day at Pardes Shalom, where there had been no personal loss, we were there simply to dedicate our new entrance grounds, some might rightly have been taken aback by spontaneous laughter at a place of solemnity and remembrance. Yet the memory of my granddaughter's exclamation stays with me as a construct, as a metaphor for the drama of the life cycle. Within that life cycle, we must all know the duality of tears and of laughter, through the eyes of innocent youth as well as through the eyes of mature reflection. The manifestation of both tears and laughter embraces the power of both in the joy and in the pain that every person must experience as being partner to the life process. But how exactly does Judaism understand the passing of lives? Some religions see it as a positive spectacle. They sanctify it as a portal to a transcendence that leads to a more spiritual dimension than that capable of being achieved in this life. That is not the Hebraic message. Judaism sees death as an end to the human responsibility of bringing spirituality into this earthly realm. The departed are seen as freed from the commandments. In this world, man is given the opportunity to create, to act, to accomplish, while in the world to come, he is powerless to effect change. We believe that we must therefore turn our attention to the needs of the living in order to fulfill the commandment to create a world worthy of the divine vision. Now, every person at birth has been given the gift of a talent, a potential that must be nurtured and matured to the benefit of mankind. Our loss is red and years wasted, and the unfulfilled promise that shone so brightly in the eyes of each newborn child. Because every person is a unique human being, every death is tragic. But in the theology of Judaism, death in and of itself is not considered so. If you think deeply about it, it's in man's unfulfilled promise that we experience our greatest loss and our truest challenge. Our sages throughout centuries past have declared that participation with others in mourning and commemorating a life should be had in proportion. Jews believe that mourning should not be so excessive that it sets a mood that is irreconcilable with the fact that generations do and must pass on. But because passing on is so much a natural and an inescapable part of the symphony of life, because those that we once loved and mourned can yet inspire our years, it is with that understanding that I chose the name Pardes Chaim for the cemetery whose official opening we celebrate today. Pardes actually has its root meaning in the word paradise, an enclosed garden. Pardes Chaim translates as the garden of life. It will be a place where we will grow the fruit of remembrance and the wisdom flowers of generations past. The principles that underlay the establishment of Kroner Hebrew Memorial Park with Pardes Shalom as its first effort evolved into a self-imposed mandate. I had at the beginning undertaking an obligation to satisfy our total Jewish community burial needs for all time. By the early 90s, it was apparent that it would soon be necessary to build another cemetery. As a matter of timing, it may be wise to reflect on the fact that while Pardes Shalom was started on a shoestring of hope and a prayer, Pardes Chaim, from the time of purchasing this land to its first use, has taken some 15 years and an expenditure of many, many millions of dollars. It won't be easy for small independent cemeteries to be structured in the future. The regulatory and approval process with its attendant delays and escalating costs are light years away from those in place at the time of building Pardes Shalom. But now, as a mature and successful corporation, we're able to create and finance a first phase at this site, which is larger in size than the whole of Pardes Chaim. To summarize, we benefit the community fourfold. Firstly, it benefits from reasonable and affordable charges for our services. Secondly, it creates a competitive barrier to escalating plots elsewhere. Thirdly, it benefits from the surpluses generated in the ongoing business itself. And fourthly, it is of a size and a scale necessary to generate the funds required for continuity. It's a big, big problem. I'll explain a little bit of that later. So this will be the last time that I speak to our community on occasions such as the one we celebrate today. And so it's a proper time for me to share with you some thoughts and observations gained during a span of some 45 years. At times I've been asked to explain how Toronto Memorial Park came into being. There's some confusion in the mind of the general community as to its origin. After quite a protracted and sometimes conflicted deliberation, I've decided to publicly explain this origin, not just to set the record straight, more importantly because the story of its birth has a direct bearing on the structure and purposes of Pardes Chaim and now of Pardes Chaim. In 1965, it's a long time ago, I had come to realize that a new model, a newly structured cemetery operation could be the vehicle for my ongoing contribution to the community. It could be established on a much grander scale than what had been ever done before. It could be established and run in an entirely new way, in a way that to my knowledge had never been attempted or achieved in or by any major Jewish community anywhere. It could be run as a business by a corporation, but it could be owned by the whole community in all of its diversity, which it would serve for all the years to come. Properly administered, the cemetery use, which would be generational in its continuity, could fund generational needs in perpetuity. Departing generations would gift ensuing ones in an ongoing and automatic relationship, which could serve as long as there was a Jewish presence in Toronto. It was a simple formula. I had to try to make it work. But my aim was not only to produce ongoing revenue for the community, it was as well to produce a new model in cemetery usage and its administration. It would set new standards for beauty, for service, for the correction of abuses. The time had come to make the vision a reality. In 1970, 5 years after my initial research and negotiations with the existing organization had come to a dead end, I bought the land which became Pardes Chaim and began the process to rezone the land for cemetery usage. By November of 1972, when some of the approvals had been received, I gifted both the property and the business to the community. Now with careful planning, with building the cemetery in stages, Pardes Chaim was not a financial burden to the community coffers from the very beginning. I am gratified that Federation, on behalf of the community, has never had to invest a penny towards the establishment of the cemetery, its operation, or its growth. But before the business was up and running, I had to determine how our cemetery operation would be governed. How was this operation going to satisfy community needs? From my own experience and for talking to a number of people like you, I found a number of issues that needed addressing. It was the resolution of those issues that gave rise to the principles on which Toronto Hebrew Memorial Park was founded. There is, for example, no reason for cemeteries to be forbidding ugly places which people are reluctant to visit. There's nothing in halakha that constrains the beautification of the cemetery, quite the contrary. I had at the beginning determined that our cemeteries would be beautifully landscaped and maintained. One of the more satisfying experiences I have had through the years has been in the calls from people who've told me that they were comforted in their worst moments by the beauty of Pardes Chaim, which they visit more often than usual and more than custom requires. We have recently completed a professional survey, an inventory of the treated areas at Pardes Chaim. You should know, and I'm proud to report, that we are third in the variety of trees plant of institutional grounds surveyed in Toronto. We are surpassed only by Mount Pleasant Cemetery and the University of Toronto grounds. Both of these institutions predate us by 110 years. Pardes Chaim, being newly established, is obviously not now extensively treated as Pardes Chaim. Over the passage of time, however, it will be landscaped and maintained to a similar high standard. In time, we will build a beautiful chapel, and eventually we will build areas where people can walk or sit quietly undisturbed, contemplate their feelings. But how can you ensure, how can you guarantee an ongoing high standard of beautification and maintenance? A cemetery that has no continuity in its ownership and control will eventually be abandoned. It is easy to understand that a plot that sold for $10 in the year 1900 cannot support maintenance costs in the year 2010. In fact, some of our older cemeteries are badly maintained, are in danger of abandonment. Many small cemetery organizations are defunct, simply have no surviving membership. Monuments are fallen, some are broken. There's no one left to set them right. When a cemetery is abandoned, it falls to the municipality, Madam Mayor, in which it is located. They, in effect, become the responsible owners. Maintenance funds required to be set aside by legislative fiat can become inadequate in their purpose because of inflation. In that case, the only way to guarantee adequate maintenance is to develop new cemetery lands as needed, the plots from which at current prices can support older grounds as well. New grounds must therefore be developed within the same corporate ownership. Because TFMP is owned by the total community through federation, its continuity and therefore its capability for generational maintenance can be assured. As a consequence, no cemetery owned and operated by THMP will ever become abandoned. If we were going to deal openly and fairly with the community in its totality, we have to develop a culture of sensitive service. One had to say yes rather than no to meaningful submissions by individuals and organizations. In a diverse community, this has not always been easy or possible, but I believe in the main that we have achieved a balance. I wanted to create a structure which would eliminate abuses. People are most vulnerable emotionally when a loved one is lost. They're not able to resist pressure tactics at that difficult and traumatic time in their lives. I wanted to make certain that an adequate supply of plots would always be available so that there would not be an incentive to charge inflated prices. I wanted to provide for the indigent and for the hard-pressed. And though we have done much in this area, including the prohibition of profiteering, I cannot say that abuses by some of our member organizations do not occur, or that we do not make mistakes in the administrative process. But when we are informed of instances of abuse or error, we make every effort to redress the wrong done. Above all, I had hoped that our organization would serve to bring our community closer together. I believe it's done so. Every branch of Jewish expression is accommodated in Pardes Chaim, as they will be at Pardes Chaim and at successor cemeteries. However, our differences in life, we are equally served at the end. In a world approaching 7 billion people, we of the Jewish family, all of us included, are not quite one-half the population of any of the world's major cities. When you consider how few we are in number in a world community, I believe that resolving differences among us is an ambition worth thinking and acting upon. While retaining our differences, we can at least honor each other with admiration and respect, for we are moved and affected by the same needs and by the same world events. There's no distinction made between us by those who do not admire us. We entertain the same ideals and obligations. We have the same high hope for our children and for our grandchildren. Now, there's one other function that a community cemetery embraces that does no other. As the generations move on, the cemetery becomes the repository of the history of that community. That history speaks to us of who we were. It reminds us of who we are. It tells us of who we may yet become. In fact, cemeteries are successor communities as restructured and resettled in a final common resting place. The rituals that we practice today have evolved over the centuries. We do not inter our deceased in caves as did our ancestors in the Holy Land some thousands of years ago. But in our dedication to the memory of the departed generations, we form an unbroken link to our line. It is a link of biblical proportion. But mourners don't generally come to visit a cemetery to tap into its historical construct. They come to visit a specific place. It's a place where they have erected a marker, a monument, signify a unique life once lived. You and I come to talk to the stones. They are stones that stand in the place of someone, a person, who had family, who had hopes, who had ambition, who had dreams and memories. They must not be forgotten. They must be commemorated. Stones belong not only to specific families, but to all of us as well, for they are our community's heritage and its legacy. In past generations, the habit has been rediscovered in those coming to visit the cemetery, as you have heard of leaving a little pebble behind. A little stone that says, I was here, I remember. As long as I remember, you are still with me. By our very presence, we give thanks for the still nurturing memory of those who raised us to maturity, but are now gone from our lives. We turn to ask forgiveness for hurts inflicted long ago, for words said in anger, for words which could not be redeemed, for injurious words that have not had the opportunity of being washed clean. We come to say the things that should have been said, but were not, out of fear or misplaced pride. We come to explain long lost, forgotten grievances, to ask pardon and to forgive in turn. We come to heal our hearts, and we come to comfort our souls. One need not wonder that Jews the world over visit cemeteries faithfully before the days of awe, the high holiday signifying the beginning of a new year. At a time of personal reassessment, we instinctively turn to guidance, for guidance to the memory of those who've gone before. We want our lives to live our lives as so as to give meaning to symbolic continuity of theirs. Now, looking ahead, as the years unfold, we will have to periodically reconsider ongoing needs. Our community will grow in number. Its composition and demographics will change. What served in the past might not serve quite as well in the future. While one cannot anticipate all of the issues that may confront future leadership, I am confident that a strong, well-run, and unfettered institution, such as THMP is today, will meet and surmount whatever challenges that might arise. Because of unprecedented and immediate need, we have already begun operations at Pardes Chaim. In doing so, we are aware that this new and historic ground will be a hallowed link in the chain of sacred repositories of the memories of our ancient people. Within the spirit embedded in their timeless continuity, within the passing of the ages, historic anomalies, generational distinctions and differences, fracturing disputes, incubating angers, all fade and disappear. In the end, we are and will remain one people. Now, it's not possible for me to recount how many over the years have given so much of their time and sincere effort to this organization. Nothing of the scale of this endeavor is accomplished by one person acting alone, or even by a number of people who come and go. At Pardes Chaim, we host 70-member organizations, have plot sections, and therefore are entitled to apply for representation at a board level. This shows that we have served the needs of an extraordinarily large segment of our community. In fact, we presently administer to more than one-half of all the burials in the Greater Toronto area. It speaks well of the work done by many devoted people who've made THMP the indispensable organization that it has become. We have attracted notice abroad. It increasingly serves as a model for Jewish communities elsewhere. I want very much to acknowledge and thank our long-acting, totally devoted, and insufficiently recognized exceptional President Bill Draymond. Bill served with me many years when I was president of THMP. I have served under his leadership for 20 years since that time. His leadership and counsel are exemplary. He has been a leader not only in the affairs of THMP, but in our ongoing relationship with the ministry, where our reputation is of the highest order. He's listened to with respect at associate meetings and forums of cemetery organizations in Ontario and throughout North America, where THMP is known, respected, and regarded as a model to be emulated. With people coming from Louisiana to see what we've done. It's quite unbelievable. I remember and acknowledge Ben Schneider. Ben knew the community well. He was in a position to recommend me to the organizations that became our first sectional plot purchasers long before I was in a position to produce any. He became our first executive director after he retired from his work at Federation. Ben was totally devoted to our organization. He continued to serve it even after he retired at the age of 86. I again give special thanks to Lou Greenbaum. You've heard that Lou is an aspiring community advocate, notwithstanding his time and commitments to many other causes, still found the time to work with me in the difficult, protracted planning, zoning, and servicing aspects of the development of Pardes Chaim. He continues to serve on the board. His help has been invaluable, his counsel wise and experienced. Obviously, I can't mention by name all the great people who have served and still serve on our boards and committees over a period of almost 40 years. They know that a grateful community, which is not always aware of what has been accomplished, acknowledges a job well done as confirmed by your presence here today. It's been 45 years since I began what has become quite an adventure. Many faces, many voices come to mind at this moment. Many challenges met, many lessons learned. It's a legacy I carry with me as I always will. It has been 45 years, and memories course a ghostly track following rapidly on each other's coattails. I remember as yesterday, 5 years of false starts learning what not to do. I remember what I would call the years of futility. They were the years of surmounting pessimism, of navigating roadblocks. I remember finally deciding to go it alone. I remember a rapid course of positive action, buying the land, entering into a lengthy development process. I remember the zoning battles, which we ultimately won. I remember the summers spent personally on site, attending to the planning, the design of road patterns, the engineering, and the subsequent grading and servicing of succeeding phases as the need for them arose. No professional engineering firms were hired back then. It's hard to believe, but that's true. I had to become an amateur planner and an amateur engineer. No contracts for services were ever tendered. I hired people and equipment, earth movers, backhoes. They were paid by the hour, their work was scheduled, their performance monitored and certified daily. I had no budget. I simply borrowed the money to supplant the original capital investment when it became necessary to get the job done. And it was done. It was done on time, and it was done at reasonable cost. But now those early heady days are come and gone. The morning dew gives way to hot, exciting, and demanding days. The days grow long, then slowly fade as the sun retreating sets. It ushers in the calming night. It yields its place to quiet and reflective eventide. And so it is with me. Though I myself set the table so many years ago, I feel like the man who came to dinner and never left. I'm much aware of the need to move on, for I have sat at that table far too long. While it's an emotional roller coaster ride for me to accept the reality, it's a time for me to let go of an organization to which I have devoted more than one half of my life. And so on this day, warmed in the embrace of that sad sweetness that marks the waning of my travel along an historic road, comforted in the reliving of old memories, and at the time of formally opening these massive new grounds, I make my fond farewells. In doing so, I send grateful greetings to all past and present who have contributed to the success of THMP. Though I may not participate in its affairs in the years to come, my heart will always be warmed and the glow reflected in the continuing service of this great organization to the ongoing needs of our community. It's a blessing to see an idea become a reality. That reality then to grow and become a success in every dimension beyond one's initial expectation. I have been so blessed, and I'm thankful for it. I thank our president, our present board, and I thank our previous boards for their support and for their friendship. And I thank all of you who are in attendance on this most memorable day. It is through each of you that I salute the community whom it has been my privilege to serve. Thank you.
practicality to emotion. Said, everyone here now realizes, if they didn't before, how you, our dear friend, has exercised such skill, eloquence, and knowledge, philosophically and pragmatically. You've, this afternoon, talked to us of Jewish history, of structure of business, and cemetery history. And we love you very much. Thank you very much. In conclusion, we come together today to acknowledge this auspicious opening. But let it be known that Toronto Hebrew Memorial Park has not finished its development. As noted in the Canadian Jewish News a month or two ago, the availability of internment rights in Toronto and the area for the next 100 years is limited to only 1/2 the number of people currently in the Jewish community. In other words, we have a community of 200,000. We only have internment rights at the moment of just over 100,000. Finally, the other night in a very special event hosted by the UJA, Tzipi Livni, the leader of the opposition in the Knesset, spoke to Torontonians. She spoke of two poles in her country, those of orthodoxy and those of secularism. Sid touched on this in his words. What Toronto Hebrew Memorial Park has done so well over the past 35 years is bond the various denominations of this community to the point where we can all be proud of our tolerance to accept the right of all others to practice our respective bereavement customs in the very same surroundings of Pardes Shalom and now Pardes Chaim. In Tzipi Livni's words, we have met the challenge and will now continue to nurture the binding of the various poles. In order to memorialize our friends and families, the Jewish people of Greater Toronto have found a home in its great community at Pardes Shalom, and now, ladies and gentlemen, at Pardes Chaim, Hag Sameach, and thank you all for coming.